was told that she couldn't play with the boys. She was told that they were too big, too rough, too strong. She was told to give up her dreams and move on. She was told to just be pretty, be quiet, be a lady. She was told that women had to stay on their side of the court, stay in your lane. Playing and competing with men was insane. She was told that men and women would never be equal. Dreaming like that would only be lethal to your mind, to your soul. She never listened. She knew that their thinking was old. She is magic. She is the definition of spirit. She is what champions are made of. She is now.
Hey, greetings and welcome to Access Wealth Nation with Dr. Yana B. Woodhouse, broadcast on Soul City Broadcasting System Network and also listened to through WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. So glad to be with you this evening. This is going to be a special program for me, special topic. So you're going to enjoy this. Again, you know, you always got to look towards the fact of whether you're going to get your checkup from the neck up. That is the information that is so important to your financial future. So that's what we bring here. And so again, I want to also make sure before we take care of our little business here is that those of you, you know, that I'm on a mission to bring financial literacy to the United States, to the world, but first to the United States and specifically to the urban community. And since that's my focus, I have endorsed this book called How Money Works, Stop Being a Sucker. And it's written by two of my partners, Tom Matthews and Steve Seabolt. And we have classes, master classes to go with it to help people understand how money works. It's so important. I'm on a mission to bring the literacy to our community and to free up and to make at least 100 families in the, 100,000. I made that small, 100 too small. 100,000 families in our urban community financially free, and by understanding how money works. So if you want the book, all you have to do is reach out to me. It's a book, so therefore it's not an ebook. So you have to give me your address, name, address, so that I can mail it to you, get it mailed to you. It takes a little time. This postal system is getting quite interesting, but you will get the book. And it is free 99, so you don't have to pay anything for it. I just want you to guarantee that you're going to read it. Don't have me reach out to you and you tell me you haven't read it. It takes about an hour to read the book. Okay. And what did you get out of it? Just what impacted you? That's what I want to know. So that's one of the things that if you want that, and it comes with a free financial analysis if you would like. You know, if you have a plan, then you definitely are not planning to fail. And so, but if you don't have a plan, well, you might be planning to fail. So therefore, I say reach out to us at 646-375-2121. And you can get a free financial analysis. And also you can get the book by reaching out to me at anajenterprisesinc@gmail.com. Okay. Just let me know. We're here. I have a team of people ready to help and assist. All right. Now, of course, I want to mention Saturday for the ladies. I'd like y'all to know is that we're doing a special event on Zoom for women, and it's No Woman Left Behind. And this is some financial strategies that women really need to know in moving towards, yes, that's my flyer. So you can join us for the talk. That is November the 7th at 1 o'clock. And if you go to my Facebook page, you can see the flyer a little better, but it is, there't a bit.ly that goes to it. And it's the bit.ly /NWLB_WealthWave NYC. The women of my group, WealthWave, have put this together, and I'm honored to be able to speak and do the presentation. Lots of tidbits. So I suggest all, not only ladies, you can all come, but it is specifically geared towards women and what they need to know. But it's also for anyone who wants to learn more about how money works. Okay, so I look forward to your registering and getting a chance maybe even to see some of you people that are out here listening in their listening audience. I appreciate all of you. I love the notes and emails that I get from you. I think it's wonderful, and I'm glad that y'all are enjoying the show. Now, if you have any comments or questions as we go through the show, then all you have to do is just put your comment into the email. I mean, not the question area and the comment section, and we will address any questions you have and be glad to address this topic today. This topic today is business structure. Now, could you put up my flyer for me, please? My little note that I have, because through my career, especially as an accountant, I see everybody sets up these LLCs, LLCs. And there's more to this world than an LLC, okay? And this statement during this time is so important because so many people are losing their jobs and they want to start a business or may have an idea for a business, but they're frightened. Why? Because we've been taught and we've been given a little bit of a lie. It used to be that you would work for a company. First, go get a good education. First, we had to go and get a good education. Then we would go and find a job, work for that job for 30 years, and then retire with some type of pension or retirement plan. And that was the world that we were told was going to happen. That's not today. The average person keeps their job maybe 5 years, and then they got to jump to another job and keep going. So this statement in one of our presentations we do, which is I'm part of the E2E movement, which is employee to employee to entrepreneur, employee to entrepreneur program. And it says when you punch the clock for someone else, you're on their time, earning their money, and creating their dream. And that's what it is when you work for somebody. When you are free, you are working towards your dreams, your goals, and your freedom. And I want to add to that. It's not only punching the clock and it is earning the money, their money, okay? It's also they control where you live, what you put on your dinner table, because they tell you how much you're worth, you know, and when you want to go on vacation, they control that also. So that's a lot of control. So you never get paid really what you're worth. And so in respects to it, I think that it's so important that those of you who have that entrepreneur spirit should work towards it. But you need to structure yourself properly and be right about it. And so today, I am proud to introduce my guest, and we're going to go over business structures today. And this is an attorney extraordinaire, been in the business. As a matter of fact, I didn't even ask him. I'll get all that when he comes in. But I got a chance to meet him when we were working on a project with my brother, Matt McCoy. And he just struck me as someone who just was so informed and was able to help people and had the same spirit. As you all know, I always recommend folks, but I have vetted them before I recommend. And in my vetting is to know that someone will treat my referral just as well as I would treat theirs and how I work with people. And this man has done that in many cases. So at this point, I'd like to bring on my guest, Mr. Max Bolu. I think I got it right. Bolu. Am I getting there?
Yeah, Bolu, but you got it. You got it.
There. My French classes wasn't that bad. I used to, but I know Bo is beautiful.
Yes, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Thank
So I know
you.
you're beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. It actually means a beautiful place.
There
So,
it is. There we
mhm.
are. Beautiful place. So we are going to have some fun today to talk about business structure and what is good for individuals. So I'm going to attack this from, I was trying to figure out what the best way to start it off, but I think one of the best ways is to start talking about where people start off. And then I need you to bring in that legal aspect. But also, before we get started, though, I would like you to tell the audience a little bit about you, yourself, and your specialty.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jana. I'm glad to be on your show, and thanks for thinking of me. My name is Max Beaulieu. I'm the principal and managing attorney of the Beaulieu Law Firm. I represent entertainers. I represent businesses. I have a real estate practice as well. And I help set up business entities for individuals, and I help manage the corporate governance of any entities that I'm currently working with. I started out my legal career with the New Jersey Nets. I was there for about a year or so. I helped them with the transition to Brooklyn. I reviewed many player agreements, sponsorship agreements, renegotiations with the Yes Network. And I had a really good time over there. I worked closely with the general counsel and the CEO, and did a lot of stuff considering with the collective bargaining agreement and the operations manual. Had a really good time over there. I jumped out and left and did some foreclosure work for about 2 years or so. And then I jumped right back into sports in the CrossFit community. I really enjoyed that. I like to CrossFit and work out. And one of the owners of the gym wanted an attorney to represent his team that he was building up for a professional CrossFit league. So I was the league counsel for that league and set up their whole legal infrastructure. After that, I jumped and joined a sports marketing group and management group. I represented some not some artists, but some athletes with their business needs and business aspects. Helped them with the gym out in New Jersey. Helped bring some business opportunities. Set them up with a financial institution to sponsor a lot of their events. Represented a couple of award shows and got them sponsorships and did a lot of their legal work for that. And then finally, I just jumped in and started my own law firm, going solo as an entrepreneur. I set up my own entity, set up my own bank account, and I represent many entrepreneurs seeking to accomplish their dreams and their endeavors, much like of what Jana spoke about. So here I am now, enjoying my career, enjoying what I do, enjoying helping people, and I hope the advice that I give here today is of great benefit to you.
That's going to be awesome. Now we're going to be friends now. And I know you haven't had to say my name before, but it's Yana.
Yana. That's right.
But, okay, I messed up yours, so this is tit for tat.
Anytime we talk, I'm like, hey, what's going on?
That's how we do. It's just, I'm like, hey, Max.
Yeah.
But definitely, so let's get started. Let's talk a little bit where people normally, it seems like they start is with the sole proprietorship. And the sole proprietorship, basically, as I understand it from a tax point of view, it's the same as the individual. They can get a tax ID number. You know, some people tell me they got their business and they got their tax ID number, and then they come and get their taxes done. And I'm like, yeah, that goes on your tax return, your personal tax return. So I would ask you, from the attorney's point of view, is that the optimum place to start as a sole proprietor?
Well, like most attorneys would tell you, and what we learned in law school, the answer is it depends. It depends on what you're doing. So I had a client a couple of years ago who was a therapist, and the kind of therapy she did was, more so advice. She also was a trainer. And she asked me, hey, and the hot entity, as we all know, is the LLC. Like, hey, I want to set up an LLC for my business. And I told her, I was like, well, why do you need to set up an LLC? And a lot of times they don't know, and so I advised them. I was like, well, I didn't feel like she needed an LLC because it was just her as an individual. So if you're mainly just going to be working for yourself, there's not really much overhead. You're not really working with any partners, and you're just really helping customers, especially if you're going into their homes and going on somebody else's property to work as an individual. Then there need not be an entity to protect you from, because not to get ahead of ourselves, even if you have an entity and you personally commit an injury of sorts, you're still personally liable. So there is not much protection that you get from an LLC if you're just working as an individual, and there is no way that you're going to be engaging with other people. So if it's just you, you're more so a therapist, or just more along those lines, then there need not be an entity. So a sole proprietorship is the right way to go. Tax ID is good to get because you don't have to use your social security number and have it all over the place. The tax ID is very suitable for sole proprietorship, and that's the way to go.
Okay, I'm going to have our producer put up the chart we found so that we can go through all of the different entities and people can see them. I'm hoping that he can do that. There we go. So here we go, the default tax, because again, we're dealing with a tax situation. I'm dealing from, it has been in my experience, it used to be a little bit of a tug of war between me and the attorneys, because the attorneys want one thing, and as an accountant, I'm saying another, but the days have changed a bit. But like you said, a sole proprietorship. Now, if you have the next entity, which all of this can come under that LLC. And one thing I'll add to the sole proprietorship, if you are a one-member LLC, well, you're basically a sole proprietorship when it comes to taxes. You know, just know that you have not, the only thing, and this is where I have a question for you, Max. Like you said, is that if you have the LLC, and I sort of picked it up a little bit from what you just said, is that it does not remove your assets away from someone suing?
If you're a sole proprietor? Well, if you're, yes,
in an LLC, a one-member LLC.
Well, yes, if you're a one-member LLC, well, if you're a sole proprietor, you know, it may not behoove you to set up a whole entity, especially if expense is a thing for you. Now, generally, I'm always of the notion that it's just best to set up a company and just get that barrier of protection that an entity provides you, because you'd never know. And also, and like as you alluded to, you really want to protect any personal assets you have. So if you ever engage, and what I mean by engage, like signing a contract or engaging in business with an entity, it is that entity that is generally responsible. It is that entity that's at the forefront. And you, though you're working through that entity and it's your face personally representing that entity, it is the entity that's ultimately responsible, and any assets in which the entity owns will be at risk as opposed to your personal assets. So if your car is under your own name and your company gets sued, your personal car is safe, but any assets that the company may own, that is at risk in the case of any litigation that you run into.
Got it. Okay. So now we've got, put it back up, the little chart. Okay. So we've got the membership, one member. We've got two members or two people who would be like a partnership. My warning to individuals when it comes to partnerships, it's just the same as if you got married. You got to be one accord, because you are dealing with two people coming together under a business entity, and there can be some problems later on if you both are not in agreement. It's almost like, it's not the same as if you divorce, but it's like a divorce when you separate the partnership. And so that's when two people come together, or two or more, because that's one thing. But under that, you can have you can have those 2 or more people, or you can have one person, and they still can be in the limited liability company. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we're at that stage. So I'm just going to go through them, and then we're going to break them apart a bit. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have, after that, you can have in the LLC, or you could have also an option, and this is a taxable option. So I'm coming at you on it from a tax basis, and then Max will deal with the legal aspect. You can have an LLC that is taxed like an S corp, and one that is taxed as a C corp, a general corp. And then you can go to the other side, as you'll see on the chart, that the business corporation can be a C corp, and also they can be an S corp or even an S corp, or all of these entities can be owned by a corporation. So it can get real intricate if you need to build up your empire. Let's put it that way. But let's go breaking this down to a partnership. So in the case of a general partnership, there's 2 people or more who have come together, and you have to decide what the percentages of your partnership are in that. And at the end of the tax year, whatever your fiscal year is, your basically the assets, the losses or the gains will be distributed amongst the partners. Now, from a legal point of view, how does that stand in a partnership?
In terms of what? In terms of liability, a partnership. All right. So you alluded to the general partnership. It is much like the sole proprietorship, falls into that same kind of bucket per se. Same thing as a sole proprietorship, there's a partnership without any legal barrier to protect you from liability. That what is a general partnership is. I tend to feel, and it's my opinion, that general partnerships are a bit antiquated and old. Because as I mentioned earlier, if you're a sole proprietor and you're not really engaging in business with people except with customers, and you don't have a partner, then you could go the sole proprietorship route, especially if expense is an issue for you in terms of setting up your business initially. Now, once you have a partner, you have to understand you guys are one. So as a general partnership, if a single person, if your partner commits an act that causes the partnership to be liable for such an act, you as the other partner will be personally liable for your partner's actions. So that's why I say set up an LLC or any kind of business entity, depending on what your goals are. When setting up an entity, if your partner misbehaves and causes liability, it will be that person who will be liable depending on the facts and the circumstance. And your company may be liable, but not you personally, because you didn't do it, you weren't there. So you're protected. So that's why setting up an entity is important, because you may be engaging with many different individuals and entities that may act on your behalf and misbehave and cause liability to your company. But so long as you have a legal entity established, you will be protected. So general partnership, don't really believe in them. If you're going to set up a general partnership, I would say, hey, do an LLC or an S corp, depending where you're going for. We're going to talk about the differences later. But if it's more than one person in the business, please set up an entity. And like you talked about how it's much like a marriage, sometimes it could be even worse, because we're talking about some real money and property that people really put their heart and soul and energy into it. And people get personal with business. To say business is not personal, just business. And sometimes business can be very personal. So sometimes it's a very tough conversation to have. You're in the throes of the romance of business, like, hey, we're going to do this together. We're going to conquer the world. And you guys are really afraid to talk about the contract and the engagement and the agreement together, because you're going to talk about the rights and responsibilities. But what's really difficult to talk about is what happens when it all hits the fan. What happens when we have to go our separate ways? Who keeps what? Who keeps the intellectual property, which is one of the biggest things of a business? That's the brand. What is the split? What equipment gets dissolved? Who takes what? I guess it's sort of like the prenup. You know, the prenuptial agreement that most marriages don't have, but in businesses it's very smart to have, because we don't have an agreement in place. One partner could be doing all the work and the other partner doesn't do anything. If you go to court, the judge is going to cut it in half.
Wow.
You know, because there's no agreement and there's not enough facts. There may not be enough facts to showcase that the person who did all the work actually did all the work. So it's really good to have an agreement in place. It's really like, judge, it's in black and white. This is the split no matter what. So generally
just to interject. So if you even have a limited liability company that is more than one membership, so it's a partnership. As far as taxes is concerned, I produce the same K-1 that's for that partnership. And just a side note for those that do an LLC that is a sole member, there's a nasty little tax that comes out called the self-employment tax.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a nasty little tax.
Yeah, it's pretty hefty.
Yeah, it's hefty because you're paying Social Security on both sides. So it comes out to being over 13% that you're paying, and you just may have only made a little bit of money. You got to pay that. So let's go back to the partnership. So in this partnership, though you have the limited liability company and you have more than one member, so therefore now you're a partnership, you should still have a contract between.
Absolutely. Regardless, whether you're a general partnership or your LLC, the LLC contract you tend to call it the operating agreement. Right? That's usually the Bible of how the company operates for an LLC. For a general partnership, it is a general partnership agreement. But both documents details the rights and responsibilities of all parties involved, how much money or the percentage of money that they will derive from the profits of the company, and the responsibilities and the expenses that each will pay. And just in case, if one happens to pass away, what happens to the asset? Does it go to the estate of the deceased? Does the remaining partner have the ability to purchase those assets? What are the managing rights? So there's a lot of things, and there's a lot of things to consider, because leaving things up in the air is not really a good way of doing. It's not really a good way of doing business. There's a lot of confusion. There's time loss, money loss, and it's not a good efficient way to run the company. And just in case some things happen, even for the sake of yourselves, not without litigation, you could just go back to the document and remind each other, this is how we operate, and this is what this is what we will adhere to. So it's always good to have a document. Even for a single member LLC, and this applies to a LLC, it's good to have a document because it also proves that the entity is a separate entity from yourself. Because just in case you get sued, a lot of times they will want, especially if you're a personally rich person, they want to quote unquote pierce the corporate veil.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important to, when you set up a business, that you have a separate bank account from your personal account. You have an operating agreement where it shows that, hey, this entity by this contract is a living thing on its own from me, and there is a contract stating on how this company exists and how it's so separate from me as an individual. Mm-hmm. So it's just an added layer of protection. So you have the registered entity, you have the LLC, and you have a separate bank account. So those are very important. Those are 3 layers of protection you get from doing everything right and setting up your entity.
Oh, that's awesome. That's some great information, because a lot of people, when I get to sit with them, they've got this commingling. I try to explain to them, if you had IBM and you were working for them and you were part of the partnership there, and you went and took the corporate card and went to Dunkin' Donuts, okay? Mm-hmm. You are now acting and taking money from the corporation. That could be a bad situation. You are basically embezzling money if it has no writing that says you can do so.
Exactly. And what happens is, when you commingle funds, they're unable to separate the business money from your money. So then your personal account and all your personal funds and assets will become available to seize in the case of a lawsuit that you lose. So keep it all separated. If you want to pay yourself, write a check from the company to yourself, send a payment to your personal bank account. Don't just use the corporate card to pay house bills, to pay your car payment or anything that belongs in your name. Keep it all separated, keep it organized. Act as if you're hired by your own company and your company is writing you a check. You take that check and you deposit it
into your personal account.
To your personal account. Keep it orderly.
We have a question here. Should the operating agreement be signed by all members?
Absolutely. A member, now I think we didn't get into this, but a member is a member of an LLC, which is essentially a partner. Now they use different terms. I didn't come up with the rules, but hey, this is what it is. We work with the rules that we got, right? So yes, but all members should, because you don't want any lack of clarity when it comes to the member that doesn't sign, because, and here's the thing too, sometimes there could be an entity that's, now I don't recommend it. Sometimes there's one partner or one member that sets up the entity and it's just their name on the certificate or them name registered with the state. But all other members can still be part of the company as it pertains to the operating agreement. If the member doesn't sign, number one, for that member who doesn't sign, there's less proof of your ownership. Okay, and that member could be doing a lot of work, but there's less proof of it because you didn't sign a contract. Number two, what are your rights and responsibilities? Like we don't know what this guy does, and so you need clarity. So all members should sign, because if you're not there and your name is not registered under the contract, your name is not registered under the entity, then who are you? It makes it hard to defend your case. So all members should sign.
It's better to have everything possible in writing, because you brought up another factor. When you're by yourself, okay, so you still need to have something in writing to say, where does this go if I die? What happens? But
correct.
More so when it comes to, and we do insurances for what we call, key man and partnership buy-sell agreements, because you might be in business with somebody and you really like them, but you don't like their family. And you don't want
the case. Exactly.
And so you've got to put that in writing to say, okay, if I die or I'm disabled, this is what should happen. So I can see where the attorney side becomes very important, because those are the types of contracts that have to be written and agreed upon. I think some ways they're even stronger than the marriage certificate.
You're right.
Well
put, Yana. You sure you're not an attorney? You sound like one. You're trying to take my clients.
Not at all. What's that? A strategic partnership.
All right. I got you.
But let's delve a little bit deeper. Well, so we've talked a little. Okay, we've got another question. If you start off with a sole proprietorship and your company grows, how do you change the entity to an LLC?
Right. So as a sole proprietor, there isn't much change. I would say I'll reverse a little bit when we talk about sole proprietor. If you have a brand name and you want to go with that brand name, it's good to set up a DBA or assume name fictitious name. My apologies.
No.
It's a DBA. So when you engage let's say I'm Max Law. I don't set up an entity, but I was like, I'm Max Law. My name is Max Beaulieu, but I'm Max Law, my brand name, but I didn't set up an entity. So I would want to, set up a DBA, and I would engage in a contract, Max Law, DBA, Max Beaulieu, doing business as Max Law, engages in a contract with you, this, that, and the third. So that's a brand name that you may have. So I just kind of want to start there. So there's some kind of branding right there before answering the question. So now the question is, if you start with a sole proprietorship, your company grows, how do you change it to an LLC? Well, generally, what would you do first is you actually set up the LLC. So set it up, right? And then any assets that you may have, you would have an agreement between that LLC and yourself as the individual sole proprietor, if your sole proprietorship business is really moving forward. So you'll say, hey, Max Bullier, doing business as Max Law, wants to now assign all his assets and his rights to everything of Max Law to Max Law LLC now, because now I'm a limited liability company. So now your entity owns everything your sole proprietorship, your individual owns in terms of your business. And that you choose to assign to your company.
But still
right?
keeping your personal separate, correct?
But still keeping your personal separate. Yeah. So you just assign everything. You assign your bank account to the LLC, or I think you may have to start a new one and you just transfer the money and close the other one. But it's really like a contract between yourself and your new self, yourself as a sole proprietor and yourself as an LLC. Now, I would say if you set up the LLC, you got to register, have an operating agreement with your own self, and do all that, and then have another contract between yourself and the LLC. So it's a lot of documentation, but the documentation is important because just in case things hit the fan, you can just pull out the receipts. These are the documents. This is how things operate. There's no confusion. Here it is. So merely to sum up the question, you just really have an agreement between yourself and the LLC that transfer all your intellectual property and property to that new company.
Got it. Okay, so now let's go to, we've got the LLC entities. And again, in my world, in the tax world, is how people are getting taxed. So the partnership, when you do an LLC, whether it's a general partnership or it's an LLC partnership, we still come out with the percentages of what you own, because all partnerships are not created equal. You don't own 50-50. And then once it's in, I love this fact that you brought out is the fact of putting it in writing, because if it's in writing, you got something to work with, and to fall back on. So here comes the next entity that I want to talk about, which is the S Corp. So the S Corp takes you to another level. What it does is that it really separates you from the whole confusion of business. As in my opinion, the taxation is a bit different. It's still considered what you will hear pass-through entity, which means that the liabilities and the losses and the profits will pass through to the shareholders. Because now we're talking about shareholders. Now we're a corporation.
Yeah.
And in New York, you're going to pay some money. Okay. Don't think you're not going to, I'm not paying any taxes. No, you are. So with the S Corp, it's a separate legal entity. I'm giving the definition, with legal rights and liabilities, and that are different from shareholders, but that offers tax advantages given by IRS. And there are, and I'm going to put a little public announcement on there too, is that IRS doesn't have a lot of time to audit the S Corps and the C Corps. They got lots of time to audit that Schedule C. They got a whole division for it. Might want to think about setting yourself up. But before we move on too, is that you talked about the LLC and setting up. What is the average cost to setting up an LLC though, before we go to the S Corp?
Well, for the LLC, it depends on which state you're in. Let's talk about the local states here. We're here located in New York.
Yes.
I'm licensed in New York and I'm licensed in New Jersey.
Okay.
So when I talk about setting, let's start with New Jersey. New Jersey, it's typically about $125 to register your business. But you do have to register correctly. That's why I always recommend hiring an attorney. And then to register your business. Now for your contract, I typically recommend hiring an attorney for your contracts, because you have to go through explain the many provisions, have it drafted correctly. And especially if you have a special vision for your business in terms of how it's going to operate, a lawyer should incorporate that in the contract and advise you how legally copacetic it is. So that may cost depending on the attorney that you have and depending kind of venture you're going off on. So, but let's talk about setting up in New York. Now here's an interesting thing. If now, depending on what you're doing, like if you're really not going to engage or like have any investors you're looking into, I would say, you know what, set up an S corp. Because why not an LLC? Because in New York, there is a thing called a publication requirement. It is the only state in the whole country that has this requirement.
Really?
Yes. To me, it is criminal. It makes no sense. What is the publication requirement? Well, it's nonsense, first of all. But secondly, all it is that after you set up your business, you have to find two local publications, two newspapers within the county in which you register your business. You choose to register your business when you file with the DOS, the Department of State. We find two local newspapers, one weekly, one daily. You pay them the money, depending on the county fees, and you pay them money for them to announce in their newspapers, daily or weekly, depending on the publication, for 6 straight weeks that you set up an entity. After that period is over, they send you a certificate of publication and they file it with the state of New York. If you don't do that publication requirement in New York, after about 60 days or so, 120 days, I'm not sure about that, but after a certain amount of time, if you don't engage in your publication requirement, your LLC will be dissolved. All right, and then if you to set up again, you got to repay that whole thing. So it's the only state. For my Jersey clients, I'm like, no problem. We'll just set you up, get your contract together, get your Arcos organization together. Boom, you're on your way. For those in New York, yeah, we set you up, and then you can start your business. But then we have to keep following up with the publication. We get that done after 6 weeks. Then we gotta let them know. Sometimes some of these companies will get back to you, like, hey, is everything set? We get them back. Then we get the certificate, and then things move forward. So, if expense is an issue for you and you're just starting out, I would say, hey, just start with an S corp. Get the legal protection. I know I'm sucking up wind.
No. Yeah. I'm going to ask the producers, can we stay on a little longer? And they just chop this up. Because this is awesome. I think people are enjoying this. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Now, here's the difference between an S corp. Well, here's the similarity between the S corp and the LLC. Now, like you said, they're both pass-through entities or disregarded entities in terms of tax. But the tax liability still continues with you. But you still have legal liability protections because they both limit your liability. Now, I just talked about investors and stuff, right? For an LLC, and much like a C corp, individuals and entities and other companies can buy interest into an LLC or a C corp, and you can have practically an unlimited amount of people to buy into an S corp or an LLC. Okay. For an S corp, only personal individuals can invest, and you can only have up to 100. So if you're trying to, if you got like a technology and you need to raise a lot of money and you need a lot of investors, you really want to go the C corp route or the LLC route. Going the S corp route, legally it's not allowed to have entities buy a percentage of your business. So something to keep in mind.
So if you really plan on expanding and moving forward, the S corp is going to limit you, whereas with the C corp or the LLC entity, because with the LLC, can you have investors?
Yes, you can. You can with an LLC. You can't have investors with the LLC. Now, the thing is, when it comes to venture capitalists and all that stuff, they generally prefer the C corp structure.
Right.
It is more stable. It is a more rigid structure of operations, of legalities and business and stuff. So, because it is quote unquote more of a separated form of business from the individuals, whereas the LLC, there tends to be a little bit more flexibility in how you do things. With a C corp, there are more requirements in terms of organization, meetings, notes, and all that stuff. shareholder notes and all that stuff, how you call meetings, something a little bit more organized. So they tend to, venture capitalists and those who invest money tend to feel better with C Corps, but you can get investors with LLCs.
Okay. Now with the S Corp, do you still have the requirements like a board and board meetings and shareholders meetings?
Yes, you do. You still have it. In fact, how it happens is when you set up an entity for an S Corp, you pretty much set up a corporation like regular, and then there's a tax selection you have to do after, where you select to be taxed as an S Corp. When you register your EIN number, you can choose to register yourself as an S Corp, and then you do the, forgot the form, what it's called, but you have to have an S Corp selection to be taxed a certain way.
The 2553.
Yes, that's correct.
I've met folks who told me that they had an S Corp, and then I asked to see did they fill out the form wasn't done. So IRS is saying, hey, you're still a corp. You're a regular corp, and you are to pay taxes as a corporation, which the filing dates are different. You know, when you file from a tax point of view, the S Corp has to be filed technically by March the 15th, whereas the C Corp goes along with the regular tax filing in April 15th. So that's another situation there. Okay. So now that we're getting into the meats and potatoes of some of this, they said I could go a little longer too. So
all right, let's do it.
Let's do this, because I think this is so important, because I have people who come to me continuously and say, I have an LLC. And I'm like, that's great. How are you taxed? Because my understanding is that the LLC is the state entity, but from the IRS point of view, they want to know how you're going to be taxed. You know, so if you haven't designated that, then it's an assumption how many members are involved. And then if that's the case, the IRS will determine for you. So if you can have an LLC that is taxed like an S Corp. Am I correct?
Correct.
Or a corporation. Now, what is the benefit by doing that?
By selecting a tax.
Right. Well, selecting something outside, you know, being an LLC, which I understand is the state recognizing you. But then if you're being taxed as an S Corp, my thing is, why didn't you just become an S Corp? You know? Right. Well, I think as we stated, you know, S Corps have a limited way to have investors, right? So if you're an LLC and want to be taxed as an S Corp, there may be an advantage. So you're still able to have investors such as business entities, because some people want to come in together as an investor, but they got to come in as an entity. You know, so they are coming together, entity as one share, one vote, everything, but they come in as an entity, and you can still have individuals come in as investors to your LLC, where S Corp only individuals. But as with an now focusing on the LLC, now taxing yourself as an S Corp, you may know better than I do. Like there are some advantages, because if it's just a regular S Corp, where you don't have a tax selection. If it's a 2 or more member LLC, they get taxed as a partnership. You know, there's still a lot of the self-employment tax, because you guys employing yourselves and all that stuff. So a lot of tax ramifications that may not be beneficial. Whereas if you tax yourself as an S Corp, what I believe is you're able to set your salary or something like that, and only get taxed off a certain percentage that you didn't set your salary off of. So, you know, you're kind of like setting up what's taxable income and what may not be, or it might be taxed differently. So there's some certain advantages to that you may be able to speak more eloquently on that than I can. The thing is,
but there's some.
Just to interject, the thing is the taxation, because that's the bottom line. It's either liabilities of someone coming and suing you, or it's the taxes. It's one of the others you got to deal with. And so, yes, you know, with the S Corp, you are mandated to take a salary, an equitable one. That's that word I still haven't figured out what that really is. You know,
depends on what it is.
What is equitable? As long as I pay more than minimum wage? Am I in good shape? Or, but it is a pass through as far as taxes are concerned, where the corporation is just like how I learned back in the days in grad school, and they said it's a corpus, it's a live entity, it's a life by itself. It never dies unless you kill it. That's how I learned about corporations. I was like, okay. But then too, when you're dealing with the S Corp or the corporation, there still needs to be contracts written, correct?
Correct.
To identify. I know there's operation agreements and things like that, but there's got to be, how do you function in case of?
Right. Yeah. So like corporations such as, like the C Corp and the S Corp, those will generally have documents such as, bylaws, shareholder agreements, what are your shares, what's the responsibility of a particular shareholder. And it's also quite possible that if you're a shareholder, you could be still an employee of your company as well and have an employment agreement with that said company. So it's different documents, but there's also some corporations that also have operating agreements and they run off that. Well, the bottom line is, so long as you have a document that constitutes or acts as a constitution of how your business is ran, it provides like I said earlier, an extra protection from legal liability, because it clearly states that this business operates on its own and this is how it does according to this document. So whether that be but generally, if you set up a nonprofit or a corporation or an S Corp, generally bylaws and shareholder agreements is the kind of documents an attorney will draft for you.
I got you. Now, I was told this, but I got an attorney in front of me now. I want to know, is for the S Corp and the C Corp, basically for all of I'm hearing is that to pierce that corporate veil, that protection, is that the first thing what are the things that attorney, you named a few for the, I think it was for the partnership LLC. What's for the corp or the S Corp that the attorneys would go for first to say there's no corporate veil here?
Well, I think what we talked about earlier is the commingling of funds, right? Because, well, in essence, you would have kind of really diminished the corporate veil yourself, because the ability to pierce the corporate veil is showing that particular person that committed the act is personally liable, because they did something personally wrong. So if I was the CEO of Chase and I walked down the street in my capacity as a CEO of Chase and I decided to sock you in the face, I can't say like, hey, I'm protected by Chase. It's just an easy pierce of the corporate veil. That's the most simplest terms. Now, it could be in your capacity where you've committed fraud or you've done some gross conduct that is outside or below the standards of your business. In your capacity working for a corporation, they were able to pierce the corporate veil and have you personally liable for committing such an egregious act. Like, it has to be so gross. Now, it may be certain circumstances. In certain circumstances, it depends on the facts. It may be tough to pierce the corporate veil, even though the act is pretty gross. But they have an argument if a particular individual is really committing something very foul.
Got it. Yeah, like Bernie Madoff.
Exactly.
That's the best example.
And Bernie Madoff, yeah, they seized all his assets.
Right.
And he had a company set up, but all his personal assets were seized
because it was so connected and commingled amongst between the corporation and himself. Correct. So all the things he bought were under so they took it all. They took it all off.
Great example. That's where it is. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That when that happened, because those are the things I like to watch. What happens in that case? Okay, so here we go. We're we're starting our business, and I know we have a lot of individuals listening. Oh, we have a question. How many investors can be a part of a group? Okay, be part of a group entity for each business structure. Oh, is there a limitation? Well, for sole proprietorship, you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
But I guess it's more so for the LLC and the S corp. You said has to be individuals.
Yeah, it has to be individuals.
Is there a limit?
Yeah, for an S corp, yeah, it's about 100 shareholders.
100.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, no more than 100. No more than 100. For C corp, it's unlimited, and for LLCs is unlimited as well. But careful, like you don't want to have too many cooks in the kitchen, because what essentially you're doing is you're sharing a piece of the pie, but you ultimately want to have enough percentage for you where you kind of have a big piece of the pie yourself. So you really want to. If you're going to give a percentage of your company to someone, it has to be someone who's really delivering a lot of capital, or is going to continuously give you capital, or who's going to really give you that key introduction to really take your company to the next level. So you want to be careful about your investors, because they're somewhat of a partner. They may be an investor that just, hey, we're just here to invest. We're not really here for the management aspects of it. Or they'd be like, hey, I want to invest and I want to be a partner or a member of your LLC. So, but there generally is no limit for an LLC and a C corp. And
the power to be able to determine, I guess, the who gets what also, because I think about, which I didn't quite understand all the time, was with Steve Jobs and with Apple, because the board was the first thing that attacked him, and then he was voted out. Yeah. The corporation and company. So I understand what you're saying is that if you have more shares of the company, the most shares, are you considered a majority member at that point?
Yes, typically, yes. You are considered, if you are a shareholder, you are considered a majority shareholder, but you may have a contract in which you sign that limits some of your voting rights, limits some of your management rights. They were like, hey, we're going to keep you, you're going to have about 75% of the company as a shareholder, but your voting rights is only going to limit about 10, because we want to take this company a certain direction where we don't really like your vision. Now, you invented the thing, here's the money, but we got to lead the company a certain way. So it could be that situation that may have gotten Steve Jobs out. Who knows? I haven't read the contract, but that's quite a possibility.
Yeah, that's one of the things. I was like, well, he owns these shares, and how are they taking this away from him? And I've seen that many a times. Some of the, I say, what is it? Movie is like real life, and so I see some movies like that too, and I'm like, majority shareholder. Okay, question. Do you need to work with an attorney to create a DBA?
Well, I'm a little biased. I'm gonna say yes. So, it's simply a form that you fill out and you just file it, and you just follow up with the Department of State, see if they got it, and then they generally mail you a certificate, and then you're on your way. So you don't really need to. It's a simple process, but don't be afraid to ask me to get some help. And because there might be some. It depends on what DBA. Like if you have a business entity, who you're going to assign, where are you going to assign your DBA to? Now, also too, when you register a DBA, it's usually for a specific county. Usually, there's an option to register through all the counties of a particular state, which can be very, very expensive. But generally, so long as you keep your address in that particular county, and any contract in which you engage in, it is that address in that same county, then it's okay to have it registered under one county. But if you're moving around and if you started on Queens, but you decide to move in Manhattan, you want to register your DBA in that county. So
that makes sense. Okay. How does trademarking your name go with your corporate structure?
Very good question. So sometimes people get this confused. Just because you register your business name, which is a brand name that you have, just because you register with the state of New York does not mean you get intellectual property protection. Okay, it doesn't mean that at all. So if I have Max Law, that's a brand, right? And I go and register Max Law LLC with the state of New York, and then I see somebody out there, selling Max Law T-shirts, selling Max Law briefcases. I don't know if anybody wants to buy a briefcase, but selling Max Law briefcases. I'm going to say, hey, man, that's my IP. I'm going to sue you for that. Well, if you haven't been using the Max Law brand, but you only register for the Department of State for a business structure, you have no legal recourse. You can't get it because they're using it before you. All right. Now we get into intellectual property law. I don't want to get it too much. So to simply answer your question,
no, I'm going to have you back for intellectual property.
yeah. I'll talk about it a little bit. Yeah, but like setting up your corporate structure with your brand name is that doesn't give you protection. You're just securing the name that you want to engage contracts with or do business as. Right. That's all it is for that name. If you want to get intellectual property protection, you have to register it with the United States Patent and Trademark Office and file it there with that name. And if nobody else has it, and for 36 months, you own that IP. Now, there's many levels to this question. Now, you could have your corporate entity register that IP with the USPTO, and they'd be the owner of it. And so the company owns that brand. So that's the way your trademark can go with your business structure. There's also many different levels to it, but that's really the basic.
The simplest is that
at the start of it.
Have a corporation. Does that also apply even with the S Corp?
Yes, S Corp and LLC, any business entity, or even as a partnership with sole proprietor.
With that partnership, because then who's going to own it if they break up?
Well, but that's the thing. That's why you have to have an agreement. It's like, who owns it? If we break up, then I take it, or you take it, or we just continue to share the royalties of it. That's got to be talked about. So it can get kind of messy.
I tell folks, partnerships are no joke.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This might be slightly off topic, but how does a person put investment property, such as real estate, into a corporation, and what type of entity should it be put in?
But a large part of my practice is residential and commercial real estate. Just dealing with it quite a bit. So if you have property, you just put the entity, the LLC or the corporation, on the deed, and then they own it. So we could talk about, that can happen. Now it all depends what your goals and objectives are. Maybe you set up a particular entity to not really own the property, but to manage the property. Like you have one entity that owns the property, but then you have the other entity being the property manager. Like they help with the finding tenants and collecting rents and all that stuff, and the operations of the business of the property, and then another entity can actually own it. So it kind of separates everything. So there's because you separate the assets, if something happens, goes wrong with the operating company that operates and manages the land, and that company gets sued, the property is protected because it belongs to somebody else.
I got you. So it's really separating the two, so that in case someone decides to, I hate to put it this way, but we live in New York, and I consider New York Sioux City. If somebody sues on you, I am guaranteeing that somebody is going to eventually sue somebody for COVID. They're going to say you gave it to me.
It's already started. Yeah. I work a lot of employment attorneys, and they're going, their work is full because it's just these guys got to come in, some catch COVID, but they got to find COVID, they got to sign COVID waivers and all that stuff. So but to answer this the person's question, the property can be deeded to your entity in which where that entity owns that property, and that's how it can happen. Just deed it to that entity.
Well, I have a question regarding that also, because I see this a lot. People tell me that, okay, there's people who are on the deed, and then there are people or entities on the deed, and then there's people who got the mortgage. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so in the case of that, where is the liability as far as, so if I have a corporation and I have my corporation is the ownership on the deed, okay, I'm on there too because I am guaranteeing the mortgage portion.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if something should happen to me personally, does the corporation own that property by itself, or is it still under that mortgage? Does you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Who took out the mortgage?
I personally.
You personally. But the entity is deeded. Okay. Well, I generally when you purchase, if you're going to have a mortgage, they would give it to the property owner. But there are times where afterwards, the property owner may deed the house to another entity,
Yes.
right? But then you as an owner is still liable for the mortgage, right? Okay. And then so what's your question ultimately again?
What's really is that if, okay, I dropped dead.
Okay, you passed away.
Yeah.
Well, if you passed away, well, there's still, if you passed away, there the mortgage or the lender, they still have a lien on that house. They still have first rights to it. So if they don't get their property, they don't get their money back, they're gonna foreclose on that house no matter who owns it. So it's up to the person who owns the deed to negotiate with the bank, be like, hey, I own this property now, it's my deed, let's work something out for me to take care of it. Or it's like, hey, you just lost your property. So
so
yeah, because they still have first rights to it, because it like while like we talk about home ownership, like while you call it your home, it still kind of belongs to the bank if because if you don't make your payments, they're going to foreclose on it, because they're going to need their money back. So
okay, that makes sense, because I've seen people try to do that by saying, even with their trust, they've put everything, deeded to the trust. And I'm like, and I'm like, okay, but you still got that mortgage out there, and
yeah,
they can come for you, definitely.
Now, banking laws are drawn heavily in favor for the banks. That's why they call it bank laws. So yeah, there's no chance the banks will get their money, or they get the land.
They're gonna get there. They win. They like casinos.
Mm-hmm.
They win.
Yeah.
Just trying to get a part.
The house always wins. Exactly.
The house wins. Yeah, definitely. So out of this, we've learned about the LLC. Okay, we've learned about the sole membership, the LLCs, the sole proprietorships. I think, as I'm seeing this, is an overall is that you need to at least have your team together. And this is my thought: is that you need to have your attorney. You need to have your tax accountant.
Very important.
With you when you're doing all of these things, because people after the fact don't do things after the fact.
Oh no!
Don't come to us after you've already set up the LLC and you did not do the publishing, which I am so surprised. Now I learned something, that New York is the only state that that's another question. Okay, so I know from a tax point of view, if you are doing business, let's say you register your business in Jersey, and you do all of your LLC, because you don't have to do the publishing and all of that stuff, which is really good. And then, but you do business in New York. Do you still have to do a DBA in New York?
Well, a DBA is just a fictitious name. I think what you may be talking about is getting authority to do business in another state.
Yes.
Right. Let's put, if you're going to set up shop, if you're a New Jersey entity, and you're planning on setting up shop in New York, like have a brick and mortar and all that stuff.
Yes.
Yes, you would need to file a foreign entity, and it's the same process, same price, same cost as being a domestic one, but you'll be like the New Jersey LLC would, or New Jersey Corporation would register as a New York corporation in the state of New York. Now, if you don't do it, does that preclude you doing business in New York? Like, let's say you're going to keep a home office in New Jersey, but you're doing a lot of business in New York. You're doing a lot of stuff out there. Well, no, it doesn't preclude you. It doesn't preclude you at all. However, if you're really going to set up shop in New York and do a lot of work, and you don't register yourself as a registered business in the state of New York, you won't be, if something goes wrong where you want to sue somebody, you won't have the right to sue as a company in that state because you're not registered. And now, and there's also risk. You might say, well, I'm just going to register now and then sue. Well, it's possibly a risk that because you weren't registered prior, you have no recourse. You may have a recourse as an individual, but you may not. Now that doesn't prevent you from getting sued. You can still get sued, even though you're not registered. So the thing is, like, you can take all the heat, but you won't be able to dish it back if you're not a registered business. So just if you're going to do business in another state on a consistent basis and set up shop, make sure you register yourself in that state. But if you're just really located, but you're doing everything virtually and all that stuff, you're doing everything by mail, you need not register in any other state.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, can I check if my LLC is dissolved due to non-publishing?
Yes, you can. You can go to your state's. What you do if you just go on Google, if you're in New York a business, you just do a New York business search and you just type in your name and see if it's active or deactive, or see if it pops up at all. It might be there, and then you click on it, and if it's inactive, they may say why it's inactive. Maybe you didn't pay your yearly franchise fees, or you just didn't go with the publication requirement. Sometimes the DOS, the people in charge, the Department of State, or let's call it sometimes the state of New York, may fail to audit to see who hasn't paid the publication requirements. So you may be still operating, but if they ever decide to audit you, they may be like, well, we might have to put fines on you for operating, and portraying that you are a business, or you just didn't receive any liability at all. And if you have to sue somebody, or you get sued, and then they do an investigation and found out that all this time you didn't have the publication requirements, so the company didn't really exist, you become liable personally.
Got it.
Be very careful.
I'm going to throw something out there. Oh, I see a national tour on business with Dr. Yana, Max, and Sean Rochester Brewing. That's
a good idea.
That's a good idea. We can do that because we really need to know, because we would do better if we knew better. But absolutely. A lot of people just don't know, and they talk to, Ed, the elevator man, and he told them to do something and they do it and they don't go check nothing. And next thing you know, they got the wrong entity. Like for what I'm getting ready to bring up, I don't know if you can talk on it, because I have had folks who profoundly think that they need to register their corporation or their LLC in Delaware or in Wyoming.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, all right, this kind of funky. And I found out for Delaware, because all through the years being a New York accountant, it was, it bothered me, because I looked, and then I had a client who had a corporation that she put in Delaware, and there were some fees that were attached that were very heavy. To the extent she had it for 5 years, and we were talking about $1 million fee that we had to get rid of because there was registrations and stuff that needed to be, because you need to have a registering agent who's going to approach you or sue you. How? And so there were some fees, and we had to beg our way out of this. So do you have any idea about why people go this route?
Well, I always recommend, like, if you're just starting out, you're a small business, don't go out of state. Stay local. It's all here. Anytime there's an issue, you could take care of it in your local courts. If you are going to go to Delaware, it will be because you're going to be setting up something big, like most of the big corporations. And why Delaware? Because Delaware's litigation and court system is generally business friendly. When I mean business friendly, like they just know business. You got business judges, the business savvy, the courts. There's like specific court. I forgot. I think the Chancery Court, I believe. Forgive me, I have to look into it. But it's a specific court that kind of deals with businesses, and it's generally big businesses that do it. Because you're going to have to, like Chase, right? They have an entity set up in Delaware, and then they also have entities set up in New York. So it could be costly, but they're big business. They can afford the cost, and it behooves them because just in case there's an issue with business, let's go to Delaware court, get this thing settled out, bang, move out. That's it. So, but if you're just starting a business, there really is no benefit, and you got to get a registered agent. See, if you're local, the registered agent can be you, and you can use your own address. If you go out of state, then you don't know anybody out of state, and it has to be an address that's available during business hours or something like that, even if you register yourself. But it has to be some kind of legit business where they can receive stuff. Then you got to pay a fee to register agent yearly and all that stuff. So I wouldn't recommend it if you're just starting out a business. If you ever get big and you're growing fast, you can make the change and transfer all your stuff to Delaware.
And that's the thing is that's when you bring start growing and getting big. You get your attorneys and they tell you, okay, this is how to protect you. You get your accountants and they say, okay, this is how we're going to, just don't go do this, because this
exactly.
Okay, what are the approximate costs to register in another state?
It depends on the state, really. Like I said, if you're in New York and you wanted to register in New Jersey as a foreign entity, it's typically $125. But because you don't live in New York, you can't register yourself as a registered agent. You may have to get a company. There's a lot of companies that do this, that say, hey, we take on as your registered agent. So if the state needs to reach out to you, we are the agent in which they would reach out to, and then we would send a notice to you, stuff like that, in the most simplest form. But it really depends on the state. But it's typically the same as if you're registering within your domestic state.
Well, that's an interesting thing too. You brought up is that you said if you're got an entity, and like today's world, we are on the internet. We are not in any specific state. We are where we live. Okay. But we really don't have, like where it used to be, okay, you had a brick and mortar in your state, then you go build another office somewhere else. So that being said, is it more lenient now for us to just have an entity in our home state? Does that make it easier? I know tax-wise it would, except for sales tax.
Yeah.
Warning, Will Robinson, if you're selling stuff, you better know the laws in each state when you're selling.
Absolutely. Yeah. So wherever you sell, that state, you're going to get taxed. So
that's it. Don't play it. And Jersey, especially Jersey, now has it where they ask on the tax form, did you buy something in a state that we were supposed to get taxed from? That you bought. So
that sounds like a where my money question.
That's what it is. I like that. Yeah, that's what it was. I was like, oh my goodness, this is good. Okay, and to the extent your tax return can't even be processed till that question is answered. Did you buy anything out of the state that came into our state? So, like you said, it's where's my money? Okay, here's another question. Is a company that is internet based under a different structure like Facebook, Instagram, Google,
etc. I'm not sure what they mean by different structure. Well, they're still an entity. Regardless if they're internet based, they're still a business of people. People have to build these softwares. People have to build these computers. They still have to hire.
Right.
They still have employees. They still get paid. They still make money. It's still a business, and a big one. So, and they have lots of lawyers. So it's not really a different structure, really. There's some basic stuff. It might be more complex. But in terms of structure, Facebook, I don't know what kind of entity Facebook is, but I'm sure it's either incorporation or LLC. There's nothing really. I'm sure it's definitely a corporation because it's lots of investors.
Yeah,
so
they're traded on the market.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. There you go. So they so there's really no, if your question is like, is there a special structure for these kind of internet-based companies? No, there is no special structure. It's in terms of what's available out there. Now, how are these companies operating in terms of the actual business function? Like who owns what partners, which entity owns who owns a piece, who owns the intellectual property of Facebook, all that stuff. That's just something that a lot of these entities within, a lot of these business individuals and people within Facebook will have to come to an agreement within a document, whatever that document may be.
Right, and who owns what property to what element?
Yeah, because Facebook owns WhatsApp, Facebook owns Instagram, all that stuff. So.
Hello. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Who owns what?
Well, we're winding down. I appreciate. Did we put up Max's information? Because you see, he is a genius, and therefore you'll need to utilize and go to him. He's a go-to person. Yes, there we go. And he does answer his emails. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. You can check me out on. Yes, there you go. www.bolyarlawfirm.com. Email me at max@bolyarlawfirm.com. You can see my Instagram page at @bolyarlawfirm. And just feel free to talk to me. People say I'm a friendly guy, so I just want to help you guys out. Most people say, "Oh, you're not really a lawyer." I was just like, well, both of my parents were doctors, so I kind of have a more doctor. I approach things from a symptoms perspective. Like, hey, welcome to the office. So what would you like? Is anything going on? What's wrong? How can I help you? So I try to, because I think people, my joy is to help people's dreams come true and help them build. So that's what I generally like to do.
Well, that's what I'm in the dream making business. I'm talking to folks about, because right now and in this world, I see it as I opened up is a time that people, if they were going to do business or opening up a business, while you're sitting at home, get your business plan together, give Max a call, and set up, because I think it's so important that right now, especially in our communities, as the Black community is concerned, we need businesses. And then also we need to go and do business with Black professionals, Black businesses. We don't have to go out of our community. We can go to and we can find someone who looks like us, and like Max says, makes you feel comfortable, because this is brother to brother, sister to sister,
Amen.
family.
About that.
Okay, is it important to set up different companies to handle different parts of the overall business function?
Yeah. I mean, it depends. I would say, I give you an example. I'm a big New York Knicks fan, unfortunately. I'm a Knicks fan.
Okay, you can love them.
Yeah. One of the most important things out there for particular brands like the NBA is the intellectual property. Generally, you want to keep that separated from your operations. So a lot of times what you'll find out is that, the Knicks are owned by the Madison Square Garden company, but when it comes to the logo of the New York Knicks, it's owned by New York Knicks LLC. So that's a separate entity. Yeah. So what happens is New York Knicks LLC would license their intellectual property to Madison Square Garden. I'm sure for a very small fee. Because practically the same principles that's operating in.
Yeah,
but what
the books separate.
Yeah, but the purpose of it is to really protect the intellectual property. Dunkin' Donuts too. If you ever go to Dunkin' Donuts, you go on their you might see one thing like the Dunkin' Donuts operations and stuff like that, or like the franchisees. They're their own entity. Like your local Dunkin' Donuts is owned by somebody who owns it, like some individual, and it's a different company that owns it. But then when you look at some of these cups, you'd be like, oh, like DK Holdings LLC.
Right.
So because they own the IP all over that cup, so because they're not going to give any IP rights to the local franchisee except a license to use it for the brand and to sell.
Understood.
Yeah, so it's important, depending on what you're doing, it is important to have some subsidiaries under your main company to handle different things.
I got it. Well, this has been very informative. I got to have you back. I also got to get you the book because you didn't get the book yet, right?
No, I did get the book.
Okay, so you're going to get the book. I got the book and I'm going to mail it out tomorrow. You're going to get
for sure.
Okay. Because I think it's an awesome book to learn how money works and to share it with the rest of the world, because we need to get this out to folks. But Max, this has been wonderful. I see the producer has put a little cue in that, we're going to try to put this tour together because we want to reach our folks. But what I think is more important is our young folks get to see us as professionals.
Yes.
And that these are careers that they can be in, as a financial advisor, a tax accountant, an attorney, these are important things that, everybody can't dribble a ball and dunk it. Everybody can't run.
I tried.
You tried?
Not easy. Only 400 people make it to the NBA at a time. So every year it's much less. So.
And people staying a lot longer now.
LeBron 17 years. Who's going to replace him?
Yeah. So, it puts us in a position. What else can we do? And there's plenty of other things that you can do. And it's good for all of our people to see our people of color doing business and that we do business with it. I'm not trying to boycott anybody else. I'm just trying to make sure they're not boycotting us.
Yes. Okay? And empower us ourselves. Exactly.
That's it. We're empowering. And so that's what I do when I talk to folks. I will vet you, but if I see that you're a good person, I will refer you out to all that can possibly do. So, Max, he started getting referrals from me. I guess he was like, who this woman?
Yeah.
So I was like, look, I found someone who I can trust, and that my clients come back and say, I'm happy. And I'm glad that you referred this person to me. So definitely those of you who are thinking about opening up businesses, I think that you should get a consultation first with Max. And then, you're going to talk to me because I need to find out what you're up to. Make sure you don't create some tax crazy stuff. But in addition to it. So it has been great, Max. We're going to get together again.
Yes, Yana, thank you.
Yes, thank you for attending Access Wealth Nation. This is Dr. Yana B. Woodhouse, and we are signing off. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
She was told that she couldn't play with the boys. She was told that they were too big, too rough, too strong. She was told to give up her dreams and move on. She was told to just be pretty, be quiet, be a lady. She was told that women had to stay on their side of the court, stay in your lane. Playing and competing with men was insane. She was told that men and women would never be equal. Dreaming like that would only be linked to your mind, to your soul. She never listened. She knew that their thinking was old. She is magic. She is the definition of spirit. She is what champions are made of. She is magic.